Supreme Court has agreed to take up the hearing of a plea challenging the Electoral Bond Scheme in India. The top court has said that it would have heard the matter earlier had it not been for the COVID waves. Lawyer Prashant Bhushan, who was appearing for the petitioner, said that the fresh tranches of electoral bonds are issued every 2 months and it is detrimental to democracy. The petitions, which were filed in 2017, allege that the Electoral Bond Scheme is an obscure funding system which is unchecked by any authority. So the top court has clearly now agreed to hear the electoral bond plea, and this is a PIL that is challenging the laws permitting funding of political parties through electoral bond scheme. The 3-judge bench headed by Chief Justice N.V. Ramana said that the issue is critical and requires an urgent hearing. In fact, joining us here on the program is Major General Anil Verma, who's a national coordinator and head of ADR, happens to be the NGO that is the petitioner in this case. Mr. Desh Ratan Nigam, lawyer, joining us as well, and Arjun Sharan, lawyer, with us on the program to help us understand the implications of this and the fact that the Supreme Court has finally agreed to take up the plea after much delay. But before I go across to the panel, let me quickly have my colleague Charlene, for the sake of our viewers, explain the entire context. Charlene, first of all, tell us about the electoral bond issue. Why is it contentious and what is the case in court?
That's right, Afrida. So the primary bone of contention here is the condition of anonymity. Let me quickly take you through what an electoral bond is. So basically, it is interest-free bearer instruments. As I mentioned earlier, it allows anonymous donations to political parties. So the condition of anonymity is basically a vexing issue in this entire matter. It was introduced in 2017 in the union budget. This is the electoral bonds concept was introduced in 2017. Instruments don't have information about parties involved. Again, the condition of anonymity comes to fore. Only State Bank of India is authorized to sell these bonds. The donor can in fact purchase, donate to party of their choice. So we do not have information of the donor. We do not have information of the party who is receiving it as well. The instrument can be encashed within 15 days. These electoral bonds can be encashed. No limit on the number of bonds an individual or company can buy. That is another problematic point here. And also, what is another bone of contention here, what has raised eyebrows rather, is that those bonds that are not encashed are in fact deposited into the Prime Minister's Relief Fund. Also, in the last point, only political parties are eligible to receive them. Okay, so this essentially is what a electoral bond is. The condition of anonymity throughout. There is, there is no information on the donor. There is no information on the receiver, and also those bonds can be encashed. And for those bonds that are not encashed, they directly go into the PM Relief Fund. That's about what primarily the definition of this bond is. Let's also look at what this particular case, this particular plea is about. So this plea in the top court claims that this issue of what happens is because of this electoral bond, this leaves scope for corruption as well as subversion of democracy, primarily because of anonymity. Apart from that, political parties get funding via illicit and foreign sources. This is again what the petitioner claims. Lack of transparency in accounts of political parties. That also is a point to be highlighted here. Anonymity inadvertently leads to lack of transparency. And finally, also going on to say a very important point here, that the ruling party got over 60% of the total bonds between 2017 and 2019. Remember, the bonds was introduced in the union budget of 2017, and in the next 2 years, the party got over 60% of the total bonds. So this is as per the petitioner, based on the petitioner's plea that has been filed in the top court. Back to you.
Thank you, Charlene, for joining us with all the important information. Now, I welcome all our guests this evening. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program, gentlemen. Coming to you first, Mr. Desh Ratan Nigam, the issue of corruption, my colleague has rightly pointed out, and I also want to give you the immediate context here, which the counsel for the petitioner has brought to the court's attention, that a Calcutta-based company paid 40 crore rupees through electoral bonds to ensure that there was no excise raid on it. So that's the kind of corruption we are looking at, which perhaps is the reason this argument about distorting democracy is being raised.
And non-raids is not established fact, it's an allegation. It is not an established practice.
I understand. It was just to give you an example, the worst case scenario, the fears associated with it. Go ahead, sir.
We can call it fears, but it's not a truth. So let us go beyond that. Now, there was an earlier system. Let us compare the earlier system and the present system that we have. The earlier system was cash donations, and anything about 20,000 could be disclosed, and less than 20,000 was not required to be disclosed. So there was a lot of money laundering, no transparency, no accountability. And this present system in 2018 has supplanted the previous one. Now, under this system, it is done under the RBI Act. It has to be reflected in the balance sheets of both the donors and the receiver, political parties. And the only Indian citizens and Indian registered companies or corporate entities can do it. Foreigners cannot do it. So money laundering is checked the moment, and it has to be disclosed in your income tax returns as well. And you have to establish both the expenditure and income.
Okay.
So there are checks and balances. And let me also tell you that going into the Prime Minister Relief Fund is something which should be welcomed. If nobody encashes it, it is going for the larger cause.
We'll come to that a little later, Mr. Desh Ratan Nigam. First, let me just argue the points you made so far with the other panelists. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
See, anonymity is a two-way sword. It's a double-edged sword. Now, moment you disclose the names, if there is a regime change, or for example, there are business where the state parties in the state governments are different from the other states where the donation has been made, they can be punished by the other parties, regimes. So anonymity is very important. And SBI is having all the data. If any wrongdoing is being done, or any money laundering or any corruption is there, the investigation can be instituted, case can be filed, and the data can be taken from the SBI for the purposes of criminal prosecution and evidence collection. So
so primarily your argument is that this is a far better system than the previous system, and in fact you are saying that this ensures transparency, far from creating an opaque system. This actually is creating more transparency. Let's have Major General Anil Verma respond to that, please. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, with due respect to Mr. Nigam, the point is that why is the anonymity being kept in this scheme? The public has a right to know who is the donor. This argument that the other regime, when it comes to power, will harass them and all that, the finance minister had also given in the parliament, but that doesn't gel much. Let me just take you back a little to the context. Before this finance bill 2017 was introduced, the Election Commission of India, the Reserve Bank of India, the Law Commission of India have in writing given their apprehensions what has been mentioned in our PIL. And they have used these words that, shell companies are there, they may be used for donations. And now, firstly, the way it was pushed through the parliament and as a money bill, and thereafter, anyway. So when the Supreme Court heard this thing in April 2019, because we had said that prior to the 2019 elections, there should be a stay on the sale of election bond. So in April, they heard it. And the then Chief Justice of India had said that this is a very grave matter which requires deliberate hearing. And the court, in the interim order, asked for all the political parties to submit in a sealed cover all the details of the electoral bonds that were received. And this was done by the political parties. Now, what I wish to highlight is that there is no check and balance now. All the previous checks and balances which were there, like corporates could not donate more than 7.5% of their profits, that has been removed, and various other things which were there all have been removed. So now any amount can be donated, it is all tax-free, and the donor's identity is hidden.
So unlimited funding, tax-free, and yes, identity is hidden. Go ahead.
By filing RTI applications, we tried to assess how many political parties had submitted details in the sealed cover. So there were two replies, one we had got and one another RTI activist had got. As per his reply, which is dated February 20, there are 105 political parties which had submitted the details. As per the RTI which ADR had filed, we got details of 93 parties. Now, you see, there is an eligibility criteria. The party which is entitled to receive electoral bonds should have 1% vote share.
Yes.
Now, there were parties in this which did not contest elections also. Forget about vote share. There were 10 registered unrecognized parties like that. The second thing is, out of the,
Are you saying that
69
clause has
parties-
been removed as well? Are we sure of this? Because I think that still exists.
No.
The fact
The
that you need
clause
to
is
have
there.
1% vote share,
What
either
I'm
in
trying
the
to tell
general
you-
elections
what I'm
or in
trying
the
to
state
tell you
elections.
is
Yeah.
that nobody is checking anything.
Okay.
Whoever wants to donate is donating, but nobody is checking that. SBI says it's not our duty. Election Commission should be checking. Election Commission, I don't know what they are doing. So the point is that 68% of these, not 60% which you mentioned, 68% of these electoral bonds in the last 3 financial years have gone to the BJP. But the point is, whichever party is in power will be the beneficiary. So that is why all the political parties are happy with this.
Okay,
And-
that's a very important point. I'll have to bring in our third guest into the program. I'll come back to you. Mr. Arjun Sharan, where do you stand on this? Because what we have Major General Anil Verma arguing is that all the checks and balances have been removed and it suits all political parties and therefore this is likely to stay. Your thoughts on this, please.
In fact, the issue of electoral funding is not just here, it's also there in the Citizens United case in USA. Every democracy is battling this, unlimited, without limit money coming in from corporations, anonymous money coming in, and you don't know whom it is benefiting. General Saab is absolutely right. Today everything goes to SBI. Who runs SBI? Who is the finance ministry with? So it is the party in power in government, especially central government, who actually knows who these so-called anonymous donors are. And we know for a fact, and General Saab is also right, that there is a 1% voting cap. So most parties, smaller parties, independent people who are fighting elections, smaller parties who are trying to, bring more democracy. We must remember for a long time, Aam Aadmi Party and so many other parties were less than 1%. These parties couldn't take the benefit of this scheme. So this scheme benefits the big parties. This scheme benefits the party in power, and this scheme benefits the status quo. And my problem is that it's been so many years. The Honorable Supreme Court, I understand COVID was going on. I'm myself a lawyer, but this was one of those issues which should have been decided. Unfortunately, judicial time was not apportioned properly. A stay was asked for several years back. There has been no stay. We have to in 2024 coming up in the recent years. 10,000 crores is the money which has already been spent. And you and I don't even know who these people are. We don't even know which party or which individual is benefiting from the government's largest and therefore is donating. So this is a critical issue. Why do we need unlimited funds? It's good to have FDI in the country, but we don't need to have unlimited electoral spending. We have to have a cap on that. 7% was a fair cap. Why should you have shell companies being made and profits, 100% profits being used for things like this? This is, I think, a tax saving scheme or a tax scam scheme, let me put it like that. And this is one of the grounds.
The major concern as a citizen of this country is why should one party, why should the ruling party have the extra advantage? Mr. Desh Ratan Nigam, many counter arguments have been raised to the points that you made. I want you to help us understand, and for the citizens of this country, that if you allow one particular party to have this kind of unlimited access to fund, I mean, it seems as if there is no such thing as clean money when it comes to political funding, and no party is ever going to allow any change in this process because it suits them for things to stay that way. What are your, thoughts on the arguments raised about how these important checks and balances have been removed very conveniently to suit the party in power? And sure enough, there have been many elections because of the delay, Mr. Nigam. We saw 2 state elections happen, in the interim. And already it seems in the common perception that the party in power has benefited because of electoral bonds.
Frida, in fact, in democracy, political parties depend on donations, and they must depend on donations rather than, buying or purchasing people. or corporate entities. Everywhere in democracies, parties depend on donations. What everybody is arguing is the law is good, but there is a possibility or there is a misuse of the law. This applies to all laws, whether it is anti-dowry laws or domestic violence laws. They all are misused, but that does not mean the law is not good. The aims and objectives are not good. So even here also, if you look at that, KYC is sometimes, if it is found necessary, it will be done so far as the people who are purchasing it. And they are non-tradable bonds, interest-free bonds. And so far as shell companies are concerned, there is a law for deregistering them, and lakhs of companies have been deregistered when the income tax department found that they were shell companies and they were laundering money. So that law even applies here. So the checks and balances are there. And prior to 2014, the largest recipient of fund was Congress. In fact, the entire funds used to be cornered by the Congress. Today, the
No,
Congress
which is what we are saying, Mr.
fund.
Nigam. You're not answering the question. The point what we are making is, even in the last elections, when you see the results and you see the incumbents have returned to power, there can be an argument made that these kind of electoral bonds have facilitated party funding to the extent that now a certain party becomes invincible. Because after all, this is a country with a lot of poor and deprived people. A lot of time, extending a largesse would help you win electorally. That's a known fact.
Let me answer that. These are voluntary donations first. They are not coerced. Please remember that. And if anybody promises or points towards any coercion or fraud, there are laws available to it. And let us be very, very clear. BJP today is at least has about 40% of the votes. And the others are not even near to them. So if you look at the proportion that they are getting.
But if you have created an opaque system of party funding and then you say the BJP has won bulk of the votes, there would be people questioning this system, and that's what we're doing. Major General Verma wants to respond.
Let me
okay, please finish, and then I'll go across to Major General Verma. Go ahead.
Fact is, you have checks and balances. If there is any, see, it has to be reflected in balance sheets of both donors and the receivers. And the income tax laws apply. If there is any issue of money laundering, they can be caught. So checks and balances are obviously there. Anonymity has been deliberately done so that people are not victimized tomorrow. It is a very common practice. And if you look at the state-wise, donations, you will realize that it is different. It is not BJP, which is at #1 position in Tamil Nadu. There are other parties.
But it is the BJP that has got 68% of the electoral bond funding. That much of information we have access to, despite an opaque system.
Let's
have the others respond.
SBI has access to all information. The government
Just
of
that
India
we are not given access to that. Yes. Okay. First, Major General Verma and then Arjun Sharan. Go ahead.
Yeah. As per our latest report regarding the donations received by the national political parties, 1920 financial year, which we released last week, BJP got, I'm just telling you the donations via electoral bonds. BJP got 2,555 crores. Congress got 318 crores. Trinamool Congress got 100 crores and NCP got 20 crores. This amounts to 63% of the total income of the national parties. And as per the ADR report, 70% of the income of national parties is from unknown sources, out of which BJP got 78% and Congress got 15%. Now, another important issue I want to highlight is these electoral bonds are bought and donated by corporates. As you are aware, the denominations of the electoral bonds is 1 crore, 10 lakhs, 1 lakh, 10,000. Till January 22, we not 10,000 crores as Mr. Arjun mentioned, it is 9,208 crores worth of electoral bonds which have been sold, and 93% of these electoral bonds are in the denomination of rupees 1 crore. Is that you and me who's donating that? It is all corporates.
Yes, and that's why the entire apprehension of a quid pro quo existing, of a certain corporates getting undue advantage, and the nexus, the politician-corporate nexus, that becomes the bigger menace.
For elections, nobody is disputing that. The point is, why is the donor's identity hidden? We are saying remove that.
Okay.
That is all.
Let me, Afrida, let me point
Quickly.
out one thing.
Frida,
Let me just point out.
No, let Mr.
point out one
Nigam
thing.
respond. I'll come to you for quick closing
come in.
comments.
Let
Go
me
ahead,
just
Mr.
one
Nigam.
quick
See, the
point.
fact remains that the law is good. If there are loopholes, certainly there needs an improvement. The implementation of law may require certain, tightening the screws here and there and streamlining.
No,
I
but in
don't think
the interim, elections are being held, elections are being won, and the system hasn't changed. To say that on the sidelines we will keep investigating the frauds and that can go on. In the meanwhile, the system remains, so it doesn't help the citizen of this country, especially if this subverts the whole idea of democracy. Arjun Sharon, quick last word to you, please.
Afrida, I'll just say that the citizens of this country have lost more than 9,000 crores, which could have been used for public purposes, which could have been taxed, which could have been used for the benefit of the public for this country. Instead, this money has been used for essentially a tax-free scheme has been made, because you must tell your viewers that these 9,000 odd crores are completely tax-free for all these corporations. So they are not actually doing it for the benefit of the country. Their CAs are telling them, please go ahead, do this and get your money out of this. And these parties, whosoever is in power is getting this. I just hope and pray that the Honorable Supreme Court will look at all these issues and stop this completely unconstitutional and illegal scheme as soon as possible. Because the more money plays a role, we've seen what has happened in America, we've seen what has happened in other democracies where corporate funding has totally demolished their internal democracy. We can't let that happen in India.
Afrida, can I come in for 10 seconds?
Okay. Quick 10 seconds to both the other panelists. Go ahead, Mr. Verma. No, one by one. Mr. Verma, you first. Yes.
Okay, just to put the amount in context for your viewers, the last year's Sikkim budget was 7,200 crores, and this amount is 9,200 crores.
Yes. Okay. Yes, Mr. Nigam, final concluding remarks from you in response to what the others just said. Yes.
So far as misuse of the law is concerned, I am with the panel. There is no doubt about it. The law is good. There are issues which have to be taken, and Supreme Court may order certain improvements. It is a much better scheme than that existed prior to that, which was only cash donations, anonymous siphoning of fund, money laundering. This is at least accountable and improvement on the past. If there is a further requirement, we must all deliberate to improve it further.
Okay, that's a fair point. We've allowed both the sides to present their views, but of course it's important now that the Supreme Court will be looking into this matter. We do hope something concrete will come out of that hearing in all fairness, in the interest of the citizenry. Thank you so much for joining us, Major General Verma, Desh Ratan Nigam and Arjun Sharan.